Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com and Tider Insider TV. And, of course, we're mourning the loss this morning of one of the great sports icons of all time, Kobe Bryant. 5 NBA championships with the Lakers, spent his entire NBA career there in Los Angeles, and came straight out of high school and became one of the greatest players we've ever seen. He passed away yesterday on January 26, 2020. But Rodney certainly, and I as well, remember January 26, a passing of another Bryant. 37 years ago yesterday, Coach Paul Bryant passed away here in Tuscaloosa, Rodney. And I know yesterday was just an incredible day in sports with all of the tragic news involving Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and 7 others that perished in that helicopter crash. But I know both of us thought also of that date 37 years ago when Coach Bryant passed away, and his impact and influence that he still has on this state, on its people, on the University of Alabama. So I wanted to start out this morning just asking you for remembrance of Coach Bryant 37 years ago, yesterday, passing away.
Well, I remember it well. It was, I was in school at Alabama when it happened, and I still remember all the details of that. I was in a lab when we were informed of his passing. But, I've got a different perspective of the whole thing because, Gary, being born in Mobile and then moving to Corpus Christi, Texas in the mid-'60s, it was we were made fun of course, for being from Alabama. And, having Coach Bryant, these teams that he put on the field in the late 60s, down a little bit in the late 60s, but in the mid-'60s, winning 2 national championships, should have won 3 in 66. And then the 70s, it was something that, for a young kid growing up out there, his teams, Coach Bryant, kind of became my identity, made me proud to be from the state of Alabama because we caught so much grief out there and
Sure.
just became obsessed with Alabama football. And, like I said, I remember clearly, his passing and that day and, reflecting back at that time that, as a 22-year-old kid that as a young boy, just the impact that he had on me, and I never met him. And it is amazing how the things that he did, the success that he had here and his teams, the impact that they had on someone that never even had an opportunity to meet him.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I was texting with some people yesterday about Coach Bryant, and Coach Saban has been phenomenal in what he's done here at the University of Alabama. And for younger football fans, he is the coach. For those that weren't alive when Coach Bryant was coaching, they know of Coach Bryant, but certainly in their lifetime, they've seen another iconic coach in Coach Saban. But I was thinking back, Rodney, and texting with some friends about Coach Bryant was bigger than life. And as great as Coach Saban is, I'm not sure he or any coach in this era can be like Coach Bryant. That was pre-internet. That was pre-social media. That was and when you got to see Coach Bryant on TV, or if you were fortunate enough to see him in person, or you went to an Alabama football game when they weren't all on television, he really was bigger than life. And the aura that he had, and for those that were alive when he was coaching, that were Alabama fans or played for him or knew him, it's just something that can't be repeated. And I say all that because this is not a knock at Coach Saban or any of the great coaches that are coaching today. But there's only one Coach Bryant, Rodney, and you and I know that, having lived through it. But for the folks that are younger and weren't alive when he was coaching, it was just a different time and a different place. But he stands alone to me in that regard for what he meant to this state. And as you said, what he meant to you growing up in Texas, and what he meant to people. He was a bigger than life, almost to some degree, a mythological type figure. And I just don't know that you can ever duplicate that again with what we saw from him.
Well, like you said, it was a different time, a different era. The coverage was so different. You only got to see Alabama on TV a couple of times a year. So just having the opportunity to see a game was so much different than now. the kids that grow up now, they have all the access to every single game on TV, whatever it is. You've got the internet to follow it on a daily basis. And, back then, heck, if you lived growing up in Corpus Christi, Texas, if we got the statistics of the game in the Sunday morning paper, I was excited because half the time we didn't even get that. Sometimes they would include a black and white picture. I'd cut it out and put it on my bedroom wall of the Alabama player in that particular game, making a tackle, whatever it might have been. But so the time was so different, and you're right. It was, Coach Bryant, you didn't have the exposure like, Nick Saban. He's basically everywhere. I mean, you see it on a daily basis. What about his press conferences? I mean, the way things are different now in terms of, those press conferences are immediately available to everyone. Can you imagine when we were growing up, if we could have had access to Coach Bryant and all of his press conferences, Gary, throughout the week and throughout the season? Something that would have been a treat, So, again, it was just the exposure of it was so much different back then. But, I think that the kids nowadays, a lot of the younger kids, and I hear this from fans of that are my age or younger, a little younger, maybe that have kids that grew up with Coach Saban, and they say, they've got the same feeling for Coach Saban and what he's done and what he's doing in a lot of ways. That when they get older, they'll be telling their kids, hey, I grew up when Coach Saban was here. And hopefully then there'll be another guy doing the same thing that Coach Bryant did, that Wallace Wade did, Frank Thomas did, and that Nick Saban did. It's just kind of the way it is here at Alabama.
Yeah, Coach Saban has won 6 national championships, tying Coach Bryant, 5 here at Alabama. If he gets another one, he'll have 7, obviously, and he's chasing it. And Alabama didn't make the playoff this past season, so now the goal in 2020 is to get back in that playoff and have an opportunity to win a national championship. Coaching turnover has been a constant for Alabama and a lot of programs. And news yesterday that Carl Scott had an opportunity to leave Alabama as secondary coach and become maybe a co-coordinator and secondary coach for Dave Aranda, the new head coach at Baylor. And he turned it down to stay at Alabama. So that's good news for Nick Saban on the coaching front.
Yeah, I know that people out in Texas last week had told me they thought Carl Scott might end up at Baylor. They were kind of expecting it and kind of had my ear out for it. But I think he's looking to stay here and some stability for now. Again, coach is always looking to move up. Let's be honest. They have opportunities now to become coordinators and move on to the NFL. And so I understand they all have those ambitions. And but right now I think it's good. Carl Scott's probably one of the top 2 or 3 recruiters on this coaching staff. I know he's done a fantastic job of that, and there's some other guys too, of course, on the staff that have done an incredible job. But he certainly has been very, very good on the recruiting trail.
Nigel Knott entering the transfer portal, a highly talented defensive back out of the state of Mississippi, had some concerns about his status of his playing career and whether he'd be able to play again. He got cleared, and now he's in the portal. Not surprising, but hopefully he'll land in a good situation for him.
He's another one like Lashley. They came out together.
Yeah,
Scott Lashley.
Sure did.
And there was out of the state of Mississippi, and there was some thought there that at one point late in the recruiting process that Nigel Knott might end up at Mississippi State. And, he stuck with Alabama, and he came here and had a lot of injuries, of course, that really slowed his progress, put him behind, and he's never really had an opportunity to get on the field primarily because of that, or at least partly because of that. So be interesting to see. My guess is that Nigel will probably end up going back somewhere in the state of Mississippi. Again, that's just a guess. Don't have any specific insight. You may have heard something, but I haven't heard any more on that. But he is a tremendous athlete, Gary. I know this. He's got a vertical leap of 40-plus inches, and I know he's got legitimate speed. And, hopefully with the injuries that he's had, I think some knee injuries, he's still capable of developing into an outstanding player somewhere.
Freddie Roach, already on the road recruiting for Alabama, and a former Bama player, been a staffer at UA under Nick Saban on 2 separate occasions, once in strength and conditioning and another time in, player development and player personnel and so forth. What is he going to add to this staff as a defensive line coach and as a recruiter, Rodney, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, he did a great job at Ole Miss, I think, developing Josiah Coatney, Benito Jones, 2 really outstanding players they had this year. I think their run defense was much better this year than it had been in the past. I think that's, part of that is can be attributed to what, the development of their defensive line with Freddie Roach there as their coach. I think he's learned a lot when he was here. He's had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with Bo Davis, of course, the former Alabama defensive line coach that's held in such extremely high regard here as a coach. As a defensive line coach, did a tremendous job. And, Freddie had an opportunity to work closely with him through the years, and I'm sure that that's rubbed off on Freddie quite a bit. And, as a recruiter, he's just a young guy. He relates really well, communicates extremely well with people. I think Freddie understands what it takes, having been in this program for a while under Nick Saban. He understands what it takes to get out on the road and really hit it hard, recruit hard, develop relationships. Freddie's just a likable guy. And I think that's going to be something that's really valuable to him because you've got coaches, high school coaches out in Alabama, Mississippi, various places where he's recruited who really like Freddie. And that certainly is going to give him an opportunity to get his foot in the door every time. When somebody likes you, I think that's very helpful. And I think these prospects they look up to Freddie quite a bit.
Well, speaking of recruiting, we're just 9 days away from the start of the second signing period, a week from this Wednesday, and Alabama doesn't have that many prospects left that they're actively recruiting, but there are several, and there are some players out there that can make a big difference in this recruiting class in terms of the ranking and also in terms of the future of Alabama football. Can you give us the latest bit of intel that you have as far as recruiting, what happened over the weekend with some guys in here on visits, and just your feeling as we're 9 days away from national signing date?
Well, kind of as I look at it, I would say this, that Alabama's trying to fill a few spots with guys. They're limited, very limited in what they have in terms of numbers of spots in this class. But first of all, let's say they've got 2 guys committed right now that did not sign, that are still very much in the mix. It'll be interesting to see. Wide receiver Javon Baker out of Georgia, and also defensive lineman Jamil Burrows, who's an outstanding player out of the state of Georgia. Both those guys still working to get academically in order, so to speak, have some work to do in the classroom. And if they project to being in a good position to do that, I would guess Alabama will sign them. That's what those kids have said. And so we'll see what happens. Now, Javon Baker did visit Arkansas this past weekend. I have not heard how that went. But so that's 2 spots that to keep an eye on to see how that unfolds. But Carl Tucker is a grad transfer tight end from the University of North Carolina. I know Alabama has been looking in the portal for a guy. He visited here this weekend. Would not surprise me if Carl Tucker ended up with one of those spots in this class. Cedric Van Pran is an offensive lineman that's been committed to Georgia that visited last weekend. I'm going to guess that he sticks with Georgia. That's my guess. I know Georgia thinks their top competition is Florida. So, we'll see what happens on that. On the defensive side, Ennis Rakestraw is a cornerback out of the state of Texas, Duncanville, Texas, in the Dallas area. He was the Dallas Morning News Defensive Player of the Year in the Dallas metro area. Really, really good kid. I mean, just a fantastic kid. Was here on a visit this past weekend, talked to him last night, had a great time. We'll see what happens. He visits Texas this coming weekend, was at Missouri last weekend. I know that Alabama's, quote-unquote, his dream school. So, again, we'll see what happens. But to me, the big target is McKinley Jackson out of Lucedale, Mississippi. And I think if you get him, you've got kind of the finisher to this great recruiting class that Alabama's put together. you team McKinley Jackson and Timothy Smith, the defensive lineman from Sebastian, Florida, together, and what a dynamic duo you have there on the interior part of the defensive line. He visited LSU this past weekend after unofficially visiting Alabama the weekend before. Goes to Texas A&M this coming weekend. It sounds to me, everything I can pick up, is that it's going to come down to Alabama and Texas A&M. Coach Saban has an in-home visit with him this week. So if Alabama lands McKinley Jackson, Gary, and plugs in a few of those other pieces, it's been an extremely good year.
Indeed, it has been. And that's how you keep it rolling. And Coach Saban wants to get national championship number 7 and maybe number 8. You do it through recruiting. Great stuff as always, folks. You can get all those updates and more at TiderInsider.com. Still just $48 a year. Follow Rodney on Twitter at TiderInsider, and catch him every Tuesday night on WVUA 23 at 6:30 with Tider Insider TV. Thanks a lot, Rod.
Okay, buddy. Take care.